Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Flint and Lana Hudson thought they had found paradise, a secluded lake house, endless sunsets, and pure tranquility. But the moment they arrived, Karen did too. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor, she believed their home belonged to the community. What started as mild annoyance soon spiraled into absolute chaos. The crisp Montana air felt invigorating as Flint Hudson and his wife Lana stepped onto the wooden deck of their newly purchased lake house. The house itself was nothing extravagant, just a well-built two-story log cabin nestled among towering pines overlooking the serene waters of Foxville Lake. It had everything they had dreamed of: a private dock, a wraparound porch, and a cozy fireplace that would make for perfect winter evenings. For years, they had saved for a peaceful getaway, a place where they could escape the chaos of city life, and finally, it was theirs. The house sat on the quieter side of the lake, with only a handful of neighbors, most of whom only visited during the summer. It was exactly what they had wanted: seclusion, tranquility, and privacy. But from the very first afternoon, it became apparent that not everyone saw their arrival as a welcome addition to the neighborhood. Flint was unloading the last of their moving boxes when he noticed a woman standing at the edge of their driveway. She wasn't exactly approaching, nor was she trying to remain unseen. Instead, she stood arms crossed, inspecting the house with the sharp, appraising gaze of a landlord checking on a tenant. She was in her mid-50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair, sunglasses perched atop her head, and an expression that radiated the kind of self-importance that required no introduction. Flint had seen this type before, the kind of person who believed that their mere presence carried authority. Finally, she took a step forward, walking with a confidence that suggested she wasn't just a neighbor. She was the neighbor. Well, she began, her tone dripping with something between amusement and disapproval. "You must be the new folks." Flint wiped his hands on his jeans, exchanging a glance with Lana, who had just stepped out onto the porch. "We are," he said, offering a friendly nod. "Flint, and this is my wife, Lana." The woman barely acknowledged Lana, keeping her sharp eyes locked on him. "Karen Doyles," she finally introduced herself. Then, with a smug smirk, she added, "I've been here longer than anyone." Her gaze flickered toward the house, then the dock, then back to Flint. "You know," she continued, tilting her head slightly, "this used to be the Harrison house. They only used it for a few months each year. Such a shame to let a place like this sit empty when the rest of us live here year-round." She lingered on the word "us," like it carried special significance. Flint could already sense where this was going. "We'll be using it plenty," he said casually. "We plan to be here most weekends and holidays." Karen huffed, unimpressed. "Still, it's just not right to have a place like this locked up for half the year." Then, without asking, she stepped onto the porch, looking around as if assessing the property for herself. Flint's jaw tightened. "Can I help you with something?" Karen didn't seem to notice the hint of irritation in his voice. Instead, she let out a dramatic sigh and leaned against one of the porch posts, as if she belonged there. "I just like to check in on new homeowners," she said with a fake air of friendliness. "This community has been here for decades, and we like to make sure everyone understands how things work." "Oh?" Lana finally spoke up. "And how do things work?" Karen grinned, as if she had been waiting for that exact question. "Well, for one," she said, gesturing toward the dock, "we all share the lakefront. You'll see people using the docks even when their owners aren't around. It's just how things are done here. No sense in wasting a perfectly good dock, right?" Flint's brows furrowed. No sense in wasting a perfectly good dock. Before he could respond, Karen continued. "I used to take my evening tea right there on the Harrison's dock," she mused, pointing. "It's got the best sunset view. I assume you won't mind." That was when Flint realized exactly what kind of person he was dealing with. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was someone who believed that tenure equaled ownership. That because she had lived here for years, she had some unspoken right to everything in the community. Flint crossed his arms, mirroring her stance. "I think we'll be keeping the dock for ourselves," he said firmly. Karen's expression didn't falter, but something changed in her eyes. The smirk was still there, but now it carried an undercurrent of challenge. "Well," she said, her tone unnervingly casual, "let's see how that works out for you." And with that, she turned and walked away, just as abruptly as she had appeared. Lana stared after her, then turned to Flint. "That was weird." Flint exhaled slowly. "Yeah, and I don't think we've seen the last of her." As the sun began to set over Foxville Lake, Flint and Lana tried to shake off the encounter. They unpacked, set up the furniture, and toasted their new home with a glass of wine on the porch. But the uneasy feeling lingered. Flint couldn't shake the thought that Karen's entitlement went far beyond casual nosiness. The way she had spoken, as if she had more claim to their property than they did, was unsettling. "Do you think she was serious about using our dock?" Lana asked. Flint swirled his wine, staring out at the lake. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I have a feeling this won't be the last time we catch her treating our place like hers." Lana nodded slowly. "Then I guess we'll just have to make it very clear that she's wrong." Neither of them realized at that moment just how far Karen was willing to go, and just how much chaos she would bring into their quiet lakeside retreat. The first week in their new home passed peacefully. Flint and Lana spent their days unpacking, enjoying quiet mornings on the dock, and taking long walks along the lake. For a brief moment, they allowed themselves to believe that Karen was just an eccentric neighbor, nothing more. But that illusion didn't last long. It started with small, almost imperceptible things. At first, Flint dismissed them as simple oversights. Maybe he had misplaced something. Maybe the wind had shifted things around. But soon, the pattern became too obvious to ignore. One Saturday morning, Flint walked outside to find a deck chair had been moved from its usual spot on the porch. "Did you move this?" he asked Lana, adjusting it back into place. She glanced at it and shook her head. "Number why?" Flint frowned. He was certain the chair had been next to the small side table the night before, but perhaps he had just misremembered. Later that afternoon, while setting up their outdoor fire pit, he noticed fresh footprints in the dirt near the dock, prints that didn't match his or Lana's shoes. "We had some visitors," he muttered. Lana knelt to examine the marks. "You think it was an animal?" Flint shook his head. Number two even, too deliberate. This was a person. Then came the missing drinks. Flint had stocked the mini fridge on the porch with a few sodas and beers, thinking it would be convenient for when they wanted to sit outside. But when he went to grab a cold beer one evening, 3 cans were missing. "Lana, did you drink these?" he asked, holding up the nearly empty 6-pack. She raised an eyebrow. "You think I drank 3 beers by myself and just left the evidence in the fridge?" Flint checked the fridge twice, hoping he had just counted wrong. But the reality was clear. Someone had taken them. At first, Flint didn't want to jump to conclusions, but his instincts kept telling him that something wasn't right. He decided to get a second opinion. One evening, as he was locking up, he spotted their closest neighbor, Marty Pierce, a retired fisherman who had lived in the area for over 30 years. Marty was sitting on his porch, lazily rocking in a chair with a beer in hand. Flint walked over. "Hey Marty, got a second?" Marty gestured for him to sit. "Sure thing. What's on your mind?" Flint hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You ever notice anything weird around here?" Marty chuckled. "Kid, you're gonna have to be more specific." "I mean, people wandering onto properties, using things that aren't theirs." The old man let out a sigh, taking a slow sip of his beer. "Ah, you're talking about Karen, aren't you?" Flint tensed. "So, you know." Marty set his drink down and leaned forward. "Son, I've been watching that woman pull this stunt for years. She's got this strange idea that any house that ain't being used full-time is fair game. Says it's a waste to let things go unused." Flint felt his stomach tighten. "You're telling me she just helps herself to people's property?" Marty nodded. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "She been in my place?" The older man shrugged. "Wouldn't surprise me. She's used docks, porches, even sneaked into a guy's guest house once. You leave your place empty, she sees it as an invitation." Flint clenched his jaw. "That's insane." "Yep," Marty agreed. "But she's been here forever. Nobody ever stopped her. Until the last owners moved out, she used their dock like it was her own. They didn't like it, but they also didn't fight her on it." Flint exhaled slowly. He wasn't about to let this slide. Marty studied him. "I take it you're not the type to roll over." "No," Flint said firmly, "I'm not." Marty smirked. "Good. Then you'd better lock your doors." That night, Flint installed a simple alarm on the porch door, one that would alert him if it was opened. He also double-checked the locks on the windows, but the moment he turned out the lights and lay down, he felt it. The unease. Somewhere outside in the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was watching, that she was waiting. The unease that Flint had felt that night didn't fade. It only grew stronger. The missing drinks, the moved furniture, the footprints near the dock, all of it pointed to one undeniable fact. Karen wasn't just nosy. She was actively testing their boundaries. But Flint wasn't prepared for just how bold she was about to become. It happened early one Tuesday morning. Flint had taken the day off work and was enjoying his coffee on the porch when he noticed movement near the dock. At first, he assumed it was just a bird or some local wildlife, but as he leaned forward, he saw a figure walking along the wooden planks, casually as if they belonged there. Karen. She was wearing a sun hat, holding a thermos of coffee, and settling into one of his Adirondack chairs like it was her own. She stretched her legs, leaned back, and took a deep breath, gazing at the lake as if she had earned the privilege of being there. Flint's jaw clenched. He set down his coffee, stepped off the porch, and walked straight toward her. Karen didn't even flinch when she saw him. In fact, she smiled. "Good morning," she chirped. Flint stopped at the edge of the dock, arms crossed. "Karen, what are you doing?" She took a sip from her thermos. "Enjoying the sunrise. This dock has the best view, you know." Flint narrowed his eyes. "It's also my dock." Karen sighed, shaking her head as if he were the unreasonable one. "Flint, you have to understand how things work around here. We share. The previous owners were perfectly fine with me using this spot." "That's interesting," Flint said, voice cold. "Because I spoke to Marty, and according to him, the last owners hated it but didn't want to deal with you." Karen's face twitched for a fraction of a second, but then she just laughed. "Oh, Marty," she waved a hand dismissively. "That old gossip loves to stir the pot." Flint took a step closer. "Karen, leave, and don't come back." She exhaled loudly, as if indulging an impatient child. Then, with dramatic reluctance, she stood up, brushed off her pants, and muttered, "You'll learn eventually. This is a community." And with that, she walked off his dock, completely unbothered. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, Flint was at work when his phone buzzed with an alert from the motion sensors. He opened the security app, and what he saw made his blood boil. Karen was on his porch. She was checking under the doormat behind flower pots, running her fingers along the doorframe, searching for a spare key. Flint nearly dropped his phone. She wasn't just testing boundaries now. She was looking for a way inside. Flint immediately called Lana. "Are you home?" he asked, voice tense. "No, I'm in town. Why?" "Karen's trying to get into the house." Lana went silent. Then, after a beat, "Call the police." Flint didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, he did something better. Using the built-in microphone on his security system, he activated the outdoor speaker. His voice boomed through the quiet air. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" Karen jerked back like she had been electrocuted. She whirled around looking for the source of the voice. Her eyes landed on the camera mounted near the porch light, its tiny red indicator blinking. Her face went pale. For the first time since meeting her, Flint saw something that looked like actual fear. She stumbled backward off the porch, muttering something under her breath. Then, without another word, she turned and practically ran down the driveway. Flint sat back in his office chair, gripping his phone tightly. His heart was pounding. That was it. She was escalating, and if she thought this was over, she was dead wrong. Flint had barely recovered from the incident with Karen searching for his key when the real insanity began. 3 days had passed. He had added more security cameras, made sure all doors and windows were locked, and even placed a small, discreet tracking device on his outdoor furniture, just in case anything went missing. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. It was Saturday afternoon, and Flint was out running errands in town when his phone buzzed with a series of urgent motion alerts. At first, he assumed it was just an animal, maybe a deer wandering near the porch. But when he opened the security app, his stomach dropped. The live feed showed dozens of people walking onto his property. They were carrying coolers, folding chairs, Bluetooth speakers. Some even had towels and swimsuits. Flint's eyes widened. What the hell? He cycled through the different cameras. The driveway. More people arriving. The porch. Strangers setting up drinks on his patio table. The dock. A group of young men tying up a speedboat. The living room. Wait. The living room? Flint's blood ran cold. There were people inside his house. He swiped the screen furiously, switching to the front door camera, and there she was. Karen, wearing an elegant sun hat and oversized sunglasses. She was giving a grand tour, gesturing dramatically as if she owned the place. Flint's jaw tightened as he turned up the volume. And over here, Karen was saying, leading a group through his kitchen, is the fully stocked bar area. Help yourselves. I always make sure to keep it well supplied. A young woman gasped. Karen, this place is amazing. I had no idea you bought a lake house. Karen gave an exaggerated, fake, modest laugh. Well, you know, I've lived in this community for so long. It just made sense. Flint's hands shook with rage. Karen hadn't just broken in. She had invited half the town for a full-blown party. Flint immediately dialed 911. This is an emergency, he said, his voice steady but furious. I need officers sent to my property immediately. There are over 20 people trespassing inside my house. The dispatcher responded quickly. You're the homeowner? Yes, and I have everything on security cameras. They broke in. We're sending units now, the dispatcher assured him. Flint clenched his jaw. Good. Back at the house, Karen was at the height of her performance. She had moved to the dock, wine glass in hand, chatting with a group of well-dressed women. And the best part, she said, flashing a smug smile, I get exclusive access to the lake whenever I want. One of the women raised an eyebrow. But doesn't that guy, Flint, or whatever, live here? Karen waved a dismissive hand. Oh, please, he's never here, and besides, I have an arrangement. She took a sip of her wine. Trust me, he's completely fine with it. And then the sirens blared. The first squad car pulled up just as Flint did. The moment Karen spotted the flashing lights, her fake confidence cracked. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the dock. All around, her guests froze. Flint stepped out of his truck just as two officers approached the crowd. All right, folks, party's over, one of them announced. People immediately began grabbing their things, panicked and confused. Karen whirled around, her face pale. Wait, this is my... She stopped herself just in time, realizing she couldn't claim ownership with the actual owner standing right there. Instead, she turned to Flint, plastering on a smile. Oh, Flint, she said, laughing nervously. What a surprise. I was just hosting a little get-together. I thought you'd be okay with it. Flint stared at her, deadpan. Oh, I'm more than okay with it, he said coolly, because now you're going to jail. Karen's smile vanished. The scene unfolding on Flint's property looked like something out of a reality show gone terribly wrong. Guests were scrambling, grabbing their belongings in a frenzied panic, spilling drinks, knocking over chairs, and darting toward their cars as the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the chaos. Karen, for once, was completely speechless. The police officers moved quickly, directing people away from the house and toward the driveway. Flint could see the exact moment Karen realized she was out of excuses. Her usual smugness melted away, replaced by something he'd never seen before, actual fear. One of the officers, a tall, no-nonsense cop with a buzz cut, stepped forward. We got a call about a breaking and entering situation, he said, looking from Flint to Karen. Who's the homeowner here? Flint raised a hand. I am. Flint Hudson. Karen immediately tried to insert herself into the conversation, laughing nervously. Oh, officer, this is all just a huge misunderstanding, she said, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. Flint and I are friends, and he lets me use the place when he's not here. I was just hosting a little community gathering. Flint's jaw tightened. Friends? He repeated, stepping forward. Karen, I told you multiple times to stay off my property. You broke into my house. Karen's smile faltered. No, you see, But Flint had had enough. Officer, I have security footage of Karen trespassing on my property before. And today, she invited over 30 strangers into my home. I want to press charges. Karen's entire body stiffened. Flint, she hissed, dropping her fake friendly act. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. He shot back. The officer tilted his head. You said you have security footage? Flint nodded. It's all recorded. You can see exactly how she and her guests got in. Karen's face drained of color. It only took a few minutes for Flint to pull up the recordings on his phone. He showed the officers. Karen sneaking onto the porch a few days earlier, searching for a spare key. Karen leading people into his house, pretending to own it. Karen encouraging guests to help themselves to his food and drinks. As the officers watched the footage, Karen's demeanor completely collapsed. Her hands were clenched into fists and she wasn't smiling anymore. One of the cops, a younger officer with sharp eyes, looked up at her. "So," he said slowly, "you said Flint let you use the house?" Karen stayed silent. "But here you are, trying to find a spare key under his doormat." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. The older officer sighed. "That's enough for us." He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for trespassing, unlawful entry, and theft." Karen's eyes widened. "What? No, 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 no. You don't understand." As the officer reached for his handcuffs, Karen staggered back. "This is insane," she shrieked. "I have lived here for decades. I have been a pillar of this community." One of her guests, a middle-aged woman in a sundress, slinked away, whispering to her friend. "I can't believe she lied about owning this place." Karen spun on her heel, pointing wildly at Flint. "This is your fault. You people come in here, buying up lake houses, ruining everything with your—" She was cut off by the officer, gripping her wrist. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "turn around." Karen let out a furious shriek as he snapped the cuffs around her wrists. "I will sue you for this," she screamed at Flint, thrashing as they guided her toward the squad car. "This isn't over." Flint just crossed his arms. "Oh, I think it is," he said. The moment she was stuffed into the back seat, the tension finally broke. Some of her guests hurriedly fled, while a few stayed behind, awkwardly muttering apologies to Flint before rushing off. Within minutes, the property was silent again. The officers stayed behind to take Flint's full statement. He showed them more security footage, detailing Karen's repeated trespassing over the past few weeks. The younger officer shook his head. "I don't think this is her first time pulling something like this." Flint snorted. "Not even close." By the time the police finished, the last traces of Karen's party had vanished. Her wine glass still lay shattered on the dock, a perfect metaphor for her self-inflicted downfall. One of the officers handed Flint a copy of the report. "We'll be filing formal charges," he said. "You'll probably be hearing from the prosecutor's office soon." Flint nodded. "Thanks. I appreciate it." As the officers left, he turned to look at his house. His house, now finally empty again. Lana, who had arrived just in time to witness Karen's dramatic exit, stepped up beside him. "Well," she said, rubbing her temples, "that escalated." Flint let out a breath. "Oh, it's not over yet," he said. "I'm making sure she never pulls this crap again." And he meant it. Because while Karen was sitting in the back of that squad car, plotting her next excuse, Flint was already planning his next move. By the time Flint woke up the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing about what had happened. Word spread fast in small communities, especially when someone gets arrested in front of 30 people at a house party they don't even own. Karen's spectacular downfall became the talk of Foxville Lake. But for Flint, it wasn't over yet. Later that afternoon, Flint received a call from the local prosecutor's office. "Mr. Hudson," the lawyer began, "I just wanted to inform you that we're moving forward with the case against Karen Doyle." Flint exhaled slowly. "Good. We have enough evidence from your security footage alone to charge her with trespassing, unlawful entry, and theft." "She took my stuff." The lawyer hesitated. "Well, technically, yes. Anything she consumed, offered to her guests, or damaged, like the wine, the food, the broken glass on the dock, counts as theft and property damage." Flint couldn't help but chuckle. "So she threw herself a party and ended up with a criminal record. Seems that way." The lawyer said dryly, "But there's more. Several of her party guests have come forward, admitting they had no idea she didn't own the place." Flint raised an eyebrow. "They're actually testifying." "Oh, absolutely. No one wants to be associated with her now." Flint couldn't have planned it better himself. By the evening, Flint had neighbors stopping by his house just to talk about it. Marty, the old fisherman, shook his head in amusement. "Knew that woman was nuts, but I didn't think she'd go that far." A younger couple who had just moved in last year admitted they had been warned about Karen. "She told us the lake houses were open to all when we first moved in," the wife said. "We thought she was joking," the husband added. Even the head of the homeowners association called Flint. "We're updating the rules," she said firmly. "From now on, any trespassing will result in immediate fines, and we're adding more security cameras to the common areas." It was an entire community-wide reckoning, Karen had terrorized this neighborhood for years, but now that she had been publicly exposed, nobody was willing to defend her anymore. A week later, a new sign appeared in Karen's front yard. For sale. Price reduced. Flint didn't have to ask. He already knew. Karen had lost everything. Her reputation was ruined. Her friends had turned against her. Her neighbors wanted her gone. And without her fake authority over the community, Karen had nothing left to hold on to. Flint was on his porch when he saw Karen's car pull out of the driveway for the last time. She didn't stop. She didn't even glance in his direction. But as she drove away, Flint couldn't help but raise his beer and toast to the quietest moment he'd had since moving in. Foxville Lake was finally peaceful again. For the first time since moving to Foxville Lake, Flint and Lana finally had peace. No more missing drinks, no more strange footprints, no more self-appointed community leaders treating their home like public property. Karen was gone. Her house had sold remarkably fast, probably because she didn't mention her criminal charges to the buyers. And just like that, she vanished from their lives. But, as it turned out, not for long. About 3 months later, Flint got an unexpected text. It was from Marty, the old fisherman. Marty: "Heard the latest? Karen's in Florida now." Flint smirked. "Let me guess. She's already causing problems?" Marty replied with a link to a news article. Flint clicked it, and then he laughed, loudly. The headline: "Florida woman causes chaos in gated community. Arrested for unauthorized use of neighbor's pool." Flint skimmed the article. Karen had moved into a strictly regulated condo complex in Florida. Within weeks, she rearranged the community pool furniture because she liked it better that way. She started using an empty unit's balcony to host wine nights. She tried to petition for shared access to private patios. When the HOA confronted her, she yelled about community spirit. When they called security, she refused to leave the pool, and that's when police got involved. Now, she was facing another trespassing charge. Flint showed the article to Lana. She burst out laughing. "She never learns." "Nope," Flint said, shaking his head. "But at least now it's someone else's problem." They clinked their glasses together, watching the sunset over their peaceful, truly private lakefront. For months, Karen had made their lives a headache, but in the end, the law, karma, and her own arrogance had caught up with her. Foxville Lake was quiet again, and as for Karen, well, Florida could deal with her now.